Hello, everybody. Oh, wait a minute. Put my headphones on. That's right. Mm-mm-mm-mm. All right, there we go. Yes, we will be getting started shortly. I have a very, very special, I guess, what a special presentation, I guess I would say. I have the gentleman, Bart Sibrel, investigative journalist, writer. Let's see what documentary filmmaker. I see John out there. What's up, John? Um, I figure I wanted to get on here a little bit early. I see John do. Sorry, I'm getting you mixed up. Bart. I've noticed Bart do a bunch of different interviews, and I wanted to make sure that I had the time to ask him a bunch of different questions and go from a bunch of different angles and not spend a lot of time like rehashing things that other people have already talked about and asking since we have him for roughly about an hour. So what I was going to do is I was going to start off this first part by sharing some commentary, well, a couple of videos to kind of get you guys all prepped and ready. And then he should be hopping in here in roughly about a half hour. And we will be going into the actual interview. So I figure let's start off with, I want to start off with this one interview here that Bart was going into with this gentleman. And it went into some of the questions that I see that he gets a lot of times on different platforms, and so I wanted to bring this up on the screen and get this started. At least the first, I think it's like maybe the first 10 minutes or so, and then I wanted to show the moon fraud confession that the video that he received. So let's get this started. Don't want to waste much time, but let's get this started here. All right, so here we go. I guess it's Rob McConnell, his own TV channel. But here we go.
Was waiting for yesterday, or was it 2 days ago? September 11th was the pre-assigned day, and after the 1 year to the day of the publication of the book, to release a video that I've had for a couple of years, and it's the basically deathbed testimony of another deathbed testimony of the main source of my book, Moon Man: The True Story of a Filmmaker on the CIA Hit List, which you can get at Sibrel.com. And basically, as I was editing the book, which I'd been working on for 15 years, and spent 2 years editing, it's kind of the backstory of my films about producing the documentaries exposing the moon landing fraud, kind of the trials and tribulations I went through. I was put in touch with someone who was actually there at Cannon Air Force Base in Clovis, New Mexico, on June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. His name was Cyrus Eugene Akers. He was the MP security chief of the entire military base, and he eyewitnessed the faking of the moon landing. Stood beside President Johnson, who flew in from his home in Texas on holiday to view the first of 3 days of filming. And he carried this secret with him because he was threatened with death if he ever told anybody. And literally on his deathbed, he told his son, and his son on his deathbed told me. And I released that video 2 days ago.
Bart, how did you get involved in the lunar conspiracy?
Well, like you, I grew up believing what I heard, I kind of think about Adam and Eve, and, when I read about their deception in the Bible, I kind of take their side. I mean, if you tell a child there's a pink elephant out the door, they're like, oh boy, how about that? And so, people are told by the government they're on the moon. Oh, isn't that great? And they have no idea of the corruption in the government, because according to Bobby Kennedy Jr., his uncle was murdered by the CIA, and I think he has access to more information than anybody else. So after my father had given me this packet of color prints from Apollo 11, at the time, I was 4 years old back in 1969, I was asleep in bed, but he was an officer in the Air Force. And he gave me these pictures. I put them up on the bedroom wall and was mesmerized by them. So for 10 years, I saw these pictures every day from the age of 4 to 14. That's 3,650 times believing that the moon missions were real. And then I saw a gentleman by the name of William Casing, who was a contractor for NASA during the Apollo program for 6 years with high security clearance. And he said they didn't go. They could only orbit the Earth. And here we are 50 years later, and they can still only orbit the Earth. And so that kind of planted a seed in my mind. And you go forward another 10 years, and I had become a filmmaker. And one day, I'm editing for the program who, had produced that show I saw. He puts me in touch with Bill, and he originally suggested I do a documentary about it. So I took off about 6 months, and I found a lot of photographic anomalies. Now, I was a filmmaker, so my job is to make fake scenes look real. And so I know that in sunlight, and all you have to do is go outside on a bright sunny day with a friend, stand about 5 feet apart from one another, and you'll see that your shadows always run in the same direction. They're parallel. It's impossible for them to intersect in sunlight. And in some pictures from the Apollo missions, shadows from, let's say, an astronaut and a rock 5 feet away are going at a 90-degree convergence, which is impossible in sunlight, which means it's electrical light, which means they're not on the moon. And then I find out that 2 of the 3 astronauts rarely gave interviews. The administrator of NASA resigned without explanation before the first mission. He didn't want to have anything to do with it. And I'm like, maybe they really didn't go. And I thought, well, I love puzzles, and I kind of have a relentless, never give up personality. I said to myself, if anyone could figure this out, it would be me. And if they didn't go, that could be dangerous. So I turned down the project. And about 5 years go by, I had another client who basically said they'd get one of my scripts to a Hollywood producer if I did a favor for them, which was to read the Bible. And so they gave me a 1-year Bible divided into 365 calendar days. And over the next 5 years, I read the Bible 5 times from cover to cover. I wasn't a Christian by any means. However, it did develop in me a conviction, first of all, that things don't make themselves, right? The body, if you have an autopsy, they're all departmentalized, they're working together, and those things don't make themselves. And evolution really says that lower forms of life are making higher forms of life, which is like kindergarten teaching algebra, right? So that doesn't make any sense. And it seemed to me there is a judgment, there is right and wrong, there is light and darkness, and there's truth and lies. And I said to myself, Rob, if they didn't go to the moon, that's actually more profound historically than if they'd actually gone. And if that's the case, then the truth needs to be known for the betterment of mankind. And I realized I'm going to die anyway, so I might as well die, risk my life for a just cause. So I changed my mind, and I was put in touch with a millionaire who was a board member of an aerospace company who builds rockets for NASA, who knows they didn't go to the moon. He gave me $1 million to produce my films because he thought it was his patriotic duty to expose it. I was still at that point producing these films, at least the first one, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, which you can see free at Sibrel.com, under the theory it might be true that they faked it. And then 3.5 years into the 7-year project, I pop in a tape that says, do not show to the public, that I got from NASA. Bill Casing thinks I got it from a whistleblower. And it's fake footage over and over and over and over again of a 1-foot model of the Earth as they're pretending to be halfway to the moon from Earth orbit with the CIA telling them how to do it on another track of audio.
Oh, Apollo 11, Houston, Goldstone says that the TD looks great. Over. Okay, Roger.
I'm like, oh my gosh, they really didn't go to the moon. So I call up Bill. I'm frantic. They really didn't go. They really didn't go. And he's like, well, Bart, I told you. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. They really didn't go. And he's like, well, Bart, I told you. I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. And I guess because I really didn't want to live in a world that was that dark. And I just wept quietly because it's like, this is our world and this is our government. And that's a sad state to be in.
Bart, I was talking to the Exile Nation earlier tonight, telling them that you were going to be on and how I admire the work that you do. And when I watched, I remember, it must be 10, 15 years ago when you and I first chatted here on the Exile. When did you release A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon?
That was in 2001.
All right, so that's when we first had you on. And you sent me a copy of that, as well as Astronauts Gone Wild. And I remember bringing it into the green room and putting it on the.
And I figure I'll stop and jump in right there. For those who don't know, that was his film, his documentary film, Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. Well, that one, and he had Moon Man, which this one is titled. And then the Astronauts Go Wild, which I will show a little clip of that. I will make sure to put all of these in the chat. Not the chat, but I'll put them in the description box. So if you guys are watching this right now, I will make sure to put it in there later so you can find this video and all the videos that I use here. Yes, people will still will still deny this. Watch out on the river. All right, Yipper, cool. We'll see you then. And I want to throw a shout out over there to Denver over on the Rockfin side. And Mark for this nice show. I'm not familiar with Mr. Sibrel. It sounds like the movie Capricorn 1 might have been the real scenario. Well, actually, believe it or not, we all are actually kind of familiar with Bart Sibrel. If you think back to that video of the astronauts, the guy who went up and he was interviewing Buzz Aldrin. And he had that video, the reporter who was going up to all the different astronauts and they were assaulting him and he was asking them to put their hand on the Bible and swear that they went to the moon. This is that gentleman here who was courageous enough to go out there and challenge them. And I feel like, that's not such an extreme thing to ask somebody. Hey, if you really went, just put your hand on the Bible. And that's what he was doing, challenging them. And some decided to use violence, which I'll show you guys a clip of that shortly. Another one was like, that's not even a real Bible. And another one got a little bit darker. So I'll hop back into this clip. I got a couple of things that I wanted to show you guys before Bart comes in here. I haven't heard back from him yet. I was messaging him a little bit earlier. So if he does come a little bit delayed, then that'll give me more time to get more of these clips in here. I do got most of my stuff loaded, so I won't have to search around for it, but let's get back into it.
Screen, and it was like, you gotta be kidding. And when I saw Buzz Aldrin, take a punch at you, and then the comments that were made by Edgar Mitchell's son, I mean, after Edgar Mitchell gave you a boot, if these guys had nothing to fear, and if they really went there, all they had to do was put their hand on the Bible and swear. That was it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Astronauts Gone Wild is, which is kind of like the sequel, you could call it, if a funny thing happened on the way to the moon, is I just tracked down astronauts and I plopped a monitor in front of Edgar Mitchell and showed him the fake footage that I uncovered that conclusively proves that we didn't go to the moon. He turned beet red, started cursing at me, literally kicked me from behind. Yeah. And in the commotion, I left a wireless microphone on him. And in the commotion, my cameraman left the camera recording. So while the camera's in the backseat of the rental car in the guy's driveway with the doors closed, he's in the house with his son with the doors closed. And we're unintentionally recording the audio of the conversation of him and his son in his house, where they're discussing whether or not to call the CIA to have me assassinated.
You want to call the CIA? Have them whacked?
So I didn't discover this until like 3 months later when the film secretary, who was transcribing the films, called me up panicked. I says, Bart, you know what they're talking about at the end of the tape when you left the mic on? I'm like, I don't know. She says, they're talking about calling the CIA to have you killed. I said, yeah, that's funny. She says, no, Bart, they're talking about calling the CIA to have you killed. And I'm like, that's funny. She says, Bart, you're not listening. They're talking about calling the CIA to have you killed.
Yeah.
Now, if they really went to the moon, and I'm some silly person who thinks they didn't, why would the CIA have to be called? I mean, come on. Now, if I'm a journalist with real footage of fake photography proving a real government fraud of the CIA, then yeah, they might have to be contacted. And odd and sad point, the book of Proverbs says that when a curse is issued on a person who doesn't deserve it, like his son was the one who suggested that they call the CIA to have him killed, his son died of cancer a few years later.
Wow. And your website is sibrel.com, just like it says at the bottom of the screen. Bart, after you completed the editing and you saw what you had there, how did you feel? Like you had the smoking gun.
Yeah, I was scared to death.
Really?
Because I had a blind roommate and a toddler son, and I had proof in my house that the moon landings were fake. I freaked out. I'm like, oh my gosh, what have I done? What have I gotten myself into? Because I figured there'd never be any proof in my lifetime, and I was wrong. And I was in a panic. I called up Bill Casey, what do I do? And the phone call was interrupted, and all these strange things started happening. And then one night on a Wednesday night at church, when I was like the second to the last person leaving, because I was talking to the elders, what I do with this tape, and they're like, you bit off more than you can chew. You need to drive now to CNN and give it to somebody to expose it because that'll protect you.
Right.
And then I drive past this business that had been closed for hours, and there was a van backed into the driveway so that it could pull out when I went by. Now there were about 300 cars leaving church, before me, and the van didn't follow them. So as soon as I pulled out, he pulled out, and I'm like, oh, that guy was waiting for me. So I immediately pulled over to the side of the road And I said, I'm going nowhere until this guy's in front of me. The guy just stops right there in the middle of the road in the middle of the night. And he realizes eventually that, oops, he followed me too close. And so he gives up and passes me. So I follow him. You know, the saying, know your enemy.
Right.
So he gets on the parkway, 2 lanes one way, 2 lanes the other way with the medium. And I get on the parkway. And I pull up alongside the guy. I'm like, I want to look at this guy. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen those documentaries about the great white shark, and they hang a piece of meat over the side of the boat and the thing jumps up.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And you can see the eye of the shark.
Mhm.
And it's soulless. There's nobody at home. And so if your grandmother falls over, if your child falls over, it didn't care. They're going to eat them. And that's how this guy looked. I've never seen a look like that in a human being in my entire life. And as soon as I look at him and he looks at me, my car shuts off. All the electrical power, the engine, and everything. Now, an ex-military intelligence person told me that that was a EMP, either from his car or potentially from a satellite. So I coast to the side of the road. This guy goes down to the off-ramp I can see in front of me, loops around to the other side, and, you know, and meets up with another car with a roll-down window, and they're talking, I guess, about what to do. And that car gets on the ramp, you know, I guess tag team, then gets on my side. I cross over, they loop around, I cross over, getting back and forth. And I'm frantically, you know, flagging down cars, and no one will stop except a taxi. And so I end up calling the police and meeting them in a bright lit area. And they're like, yeah, you need private security. And so basically, there's a lot in the book Moon Man at Sibrel.com, which is audio that I read myself, Kindle and print. And I go into a lot of things never discussed before publicly, including these CIA espionage adventures of mine. And basically, I'm trying to tell this story in less than an hour. It's kind of difficult.
Sorry,
I end up going to CNN,
Mhm.
and I'm surrounded by the police. They won't let me enter. I show them my media credentials. I show them this huge broadcast quality videotape, and I tell them exactly what's on it. Because I figure the CIA has cops on the take in every town in America of 100,000 people or more. And they do what they're told because they have carte blanche. They can, you know, go anywhere with a uniform and a cop car. So they don't know why they were told to stop me from going into CNN. So I tell them. And you can see one of the three just, you know, shocked as he figures it out. One of the three is a captain. Now, what a captain is doing on the street, I have no idea. And so I tell the cab driver, you know, save yourself. And I say, am I free to go? Am I free to go? Am I free to go? And they don't answer the question. So I assume I'm free to go. And I, you know, walk a little slowly, then a little faster. And I dart around the corner of the building, run down the alley behind CNN. And within a few seconds, I'm surrounded by an unmarked van, other police cars and police motorcycle cars. And they immediately handcuff me, immediately take the tape away. And to my, you know, divine providence, a lawyer who wanted to, I guess, have it a CNN Plaza address, his door's in the alley, you know, to afford it, pops out. And had he not been there, I probably wouldn't be talking to you today. And so one of the things that I heard them talking.
And so I figured I'll stop it right there because it was another clip that I wanted to get. I wanted to show you all before Bart comes in. And if he takes a little longer to get in, he is in the Philippines, by the way, so he is not stateside. So could be just a little bit of mix up in time. But let me go ahead and throw that other clip up right now and show you all that. So yeah, so I had a bunch of stuff that I had ready. So this clip that I'm going to show now is the clip that he posted up where if you guys were listening at the beginning of this, he said it's a deathbed confession from a deathbed confession. And I'll let you guys see this so you guys can know what he was talking about and allude to there.
Hello, my name is Gene Gilmore. My birth given name is Eugene Reuben Akers. I don't want any money for what I'm doing because hopefully this video won't come out until after my death. So I have nothing to gain, nothing to profit by telling you what I'm going to tell you. And a lot of what I'm going to tell you is available online until they see this video. And I'm sure things will start getting scrubbed. As well as moon photos. But anyway, my father in 1968 was stationed at Cannon Air Force Base in New Mexico. I made notes on my computer, so that I wouldn't forget anything, because there's a lot of little things and stuff that I'd forget. So these notes were made a long time ago. The original recording that my father made on his deathbed was destroyed in a fire. So this is my deathbed confession, because now I'm dying of cancer. I've got cancer all over the place, and they don't know where it's coming from, and I don't know if they can stop it, but it don't look good. So I'm going to go ahead and make this video for Bart Sibrel. He knows not to do anything with it until notification of my death, for which my son will respond to that. Okay. Like I said, in 1968, my father was stationed at Cannon Air Force Base in New Mexico. We lived in Clovis, New Mexico. He was in the military police for over 20 years. And on his deathbed in 2002, we made a recording of what happened. Now, I already told you what happened to the recording. But it doesn't matter, because all the facts are there. So it doesn't matter who's telling the story or whatever. I will, at the end of the video, I'll supply a picture of my father, his badge, the flag of when they buried him. I'll show you some photos of my dad. I was born in 1955. So in 1969, I was 14 years old. I vividly remember the Apollo 11 coming down, landing on the moon, or walking around and all that stuff. Anyway, I never questioned that until my dad told me what he told me on his deathbed. And then I started doing a little, nothing major, nothing, just surfing the web. I think they call it surfing the web. And a lot of that information's right there on the web. I mean, it verifies the story that he told me. A good detective, a good one, would be able to uncover a lot more of the story that I'm getting ready to tell you. So please have at it. I've never known my dad to lie. To get caught lying was worse than whatever it was you did to begin with. I remember going to school with long sleeve shirts on to hide the purple welts. You did not lie in our house, that's for sure. Dad had a really bad attitude towards lying. Excuse me again. Okay. Anyway, this is the story that my dad told me on his deathbed. Project Slam Dunk was the name of this.
And we can pause it there. We have our special guest. I'm very, very happy and excited to welcome Bart Sibrel to the Political Matrix. How are we doing today, Bart, or this evening?
Good, Marcus. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. I was wondering, I was doing some research years back, and I had no clue. A lot of the research which I had been running across and formed a lot of opinions from and made me do a lot of deep thinking actually came from work which you had did. Some of it was through other people who were just using your work, but it was nonetheless, it was your work that alerted me to pay attention to a lot of things and ask some questions. And many of the questions you had, I have some of those same questions, and a couple of additional questions piqued my interest also. So how are we doing, sir?
Doing pretty good. Yeah, it's a weird thing that they faked the moon landing. The truth is stranger than fiction.
It is, and I think because so many people are just so used to the virtual narrative being that certain things are however they say that they're supposed to be, they can't conceive the possibility that their government is lying to them. I mean, especially like you pointed out, it was under Nixon of all people.
Yeah, well, tricky Dick. What can you do?
Yeah, I was showing. I started off the show showing a little bit of your interview on another channel because I wanted to show them, just give them a little taste of some of the stuff because a lot of people know your work but don't know your work. So I guess could you give them a introduction and let them know a little bit about you?
Sure. Just go to my website, which is my last name, Sibrel.com. S as in Sam, I, B as in boy, R-E-L, Sibrel.com. And you can see everything for free. I do have a book about this. I mean, I've been doing Apollo fraud research, I guess, for about 30 years. And I spent about 10 years writing the book, 7 years making A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, which you can see for free at Sibrel.com. It's a documentary exposing the moon landing fraud that was financed by a board member of an aerospace company who builds rockets for NASA, who knows that the moon missions were fake. Because today, with today's best technology, they can only send an astronaut 1,000th the distance to the moon. That's why the Artemis rocket was unmanned. I mean, think about it. The farthest that they can send an astronaut is to the space station, 250 miles above the Earth, which is 1,000th the distance to the moon. So they're claiming they had 1,000 times greater technology and space traveling capability when they only had 1/1,000,000th the computing power of a cell phone. So that means for the first time in world history, technology was greater in the past than in the future. And seeing how that's an historic and scientific impossibility, it means they perpetrated a fraud. If it weren't for people's emotional attachment to the moon landings, they would see it for the lie that it is. There's never been an accomplishment in the history of science that when there was a breakthrough, like flying across the Atlantic in 1929, that no one could repeat it for 50 years later, when in fact, 50 years later, there were millions of aircraft, 1,000 times more complicated, flying over the Atlantic. So when they blew up the atomic bomb in 1945, just 10 years later, atomic bombs were 1,000 times more powerful. So if they could go to the moon on the first attempt with 1960s technology, which was 1/1,000,000th the computing power of a cell phone, we would have been on Mars 10 years later, and we'd be in another solar system by now, and there'd be bases all over the moon. So the fact that 50 years later they only have 1,000th the space travel capability is just preposterous. And then, of course, my film exposes classified footage we uncovered, photographic anomalies that cannot be duplicated in sunlight, as they claim, but only in electrical light, which means they were taken in electrical light. And then, as you just showed, we have a deathbed confession from someone who was there. That's in my book. My book is at Sibrel.com. You can get it on audio. I read it. It's also in print or Kindle, and it's interactive. There are 16 video links, the last of which you just showed part of. And you can, it's kind of interactive. I write a chapter and I say, now watch this video so you know what I'm talking about next, or what I just spoke of, including complete media manipulation by the government to this day. And people wanted to believe this lie. It was something positive during the Vietnam War and all the protests going on about it. And they were giving them what they wanted to, hear. And there's no independent press coverage. It's completely controlled by the government. Whatever they say, if they say it's from the moon, then I guess we just have to take their word for it. I mean, when Robert McNamara said that they completely made up the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which was the initiation for the Vietnam War, they say they just made it up. It never happened. So if they're willing to kill 1,000,000 people by something that they staged, then I think they're willing to fake a TV picture,
Oh, yeah.
And so, I mean, unfortunately, they did fake the moon landings. That's just the way that it is. And you have to have an open mind. I mean, I have a guy who was there who stood beside President Johnson while they filmed it. Plus classified footage we uncovered of fake photography with the CIA telling them how to do it. Shadows that intersect at 90 degrees that can't happen in sunlight. And then, of course, the deathbed testimony that's published in the book of an eyewitness who was there when they filmed it at Cannon Air Force Base in 1968, a year in advance. So each of these 4 proofs would prove it on their own. And we have 4 times the proof necessary to show that, unfortunately, they did fake the moon landing. And because they're still claiming that they went to the moon to this day, Orwell's great quote, whoever controls the past controls the future is proven true by the moon landing fraud. Because as long as they're saying in the past that they control, that the moon missions are real when they're not, then those same devils are controlling our future in the government, which is not a good thing.
Well, I tell people all the time, I mean, think of, well, a little bit about me. My background is I'm former military. I worked in weapons also. I spent time around some flight lines, so I know what thrusters look like when they do some, when they're taking off and landing. That's something I know a little bit about, and I know a little bit about history also. And one thing I've learned about history is the victors normally go through and destroy as much artifacts and history and libraries and all kind of things like that, so that they can control the narrative of what happened. They have the only story. You can't go back to the history books of these other cultures and figure out what really happened, because they tell you the story. And some of the things which I noticed on the photos which you point out is, and I haven't heard anybody else bring up this. I've only heard one other person say this, and this is a shout out to Pastor Thibodeau out there in New Orleans. He pointed out that if you look at just the gold foil that's on there, you're trying to tell me that this thing went thousands of miles and was going like at unrecognizable speeds, and that little flimsy, like basically foil or wrapping paper stayed on there without ripping up. I mean, that part sounds a little sketchy to me also.
Well, yeah, I mean, look at Elon Musk. He tried to land a rocket vertically 5 times before he did it successfully. Mind you, he had 6 computers surrounding the rocket. Okay, each computer was 1 million times faster and greater than the Apollo computer. So with 6 million times the computing power, the first time he tried to land a rocket vertically, it blew up. And this is with 6 times the computing power of Apollo. The second time it blew up. The third time it blew up. The fourth time it blew up. So why is it 50 years later, with 6 million times computing power, it takes 5 attempts to land a rocket vertically, and yet with 1 millionth the computing power of a cell phone, they did it successfully on the first attempt 50 years ago, when 5 decades later, it takes 6 tries with 6 million times greater capability. I don't understand that. It doesn't make any sense at all.
And then you conveniently tape over like all the stuff, and you completely just destroy all the technology too.
Yeah, they say they lost all of the original recordings of the moon landing.
Convenient.
Coincidentally, were lost the moment Ron Howard's film showcasing the Apollo moon missions and IMAX was about to transfer them to HD and project them 100 feet across. Right after he made that request, they lost 2 tons of videotapes, and they never able to find them. And then all the blueprints, all the schematics, all the original electronic diagrams as to how this rocket somehow did something in 1969 that it still cannot do today, they destroyed it. They admit they intentionally destroyed it. Now, this cost an equivalent of $200 billion of research and development. At least that's what they claim, even though they're probably embezzling most of that money. So imagine Bill Gates spending $200 billion to make the first AI computer. It works fabulous. And when it's done testing it, he throws it, the hardware, the electronics, the diagrams, and all the technology in a furnace and burns it up. That's what they're claiming they did with the Apollo equipment. Now, seeing how the B-52 was built 70 years ago, and the Air Force is still using 200 of them because nothing works better, I think if they spent $200 billion to go to the moon and it worked, they wouldn't destroy that technology. They maybe should have destroyed the Apollo, atomic bomb technology, but they didn't destroy that. So to me, if you were committing a fraud, you would destroy everything because you could prove it mathematically or electrically or physically that the rocket couldn't do these claims. So if you would perpetrating a fraud, you would destroy everything. which is exactly what they did. And if you really went, you would never do that. So the fact that they destroyed everything is actually proof of the fraud.
Well, and on top of that, the fact that, okay, let's just play, I hate to say devil's advocate, but let's just play benefit of the doubt, extreme benefit of the doubt here. If the technology happened to accidentally get destroyed, according to NASA, that there's hundreds of thousands of people who did this. You're saying that those hundreds of thousands of people don't remember anything about what they did, and nobody can replicate anything that they did before that?
Well, only a handful of people saw the full picture. It's departmentalization. That's like saying what the bank teller knows and the CEO of the bank knows about corruption in the company are identical. They're completely different. You had everything. So one person made the glove, one person made the boot, one person made the door handle. And according to Bill Casing, who had the highest of security clearances at NASA, as soon as the department became fully understood what they were doing, they would break up the team and bring in new people. They were doing things the opposite of the way you would do it if you were really going to the moon, but they did it exactly the way that you would do it if you were perpetrating a fraud. So even though some say, well, you couldn't fool or keep a secret from 200,000, people building the glove or the door or the boot or whatever. I mean, come on. You really think the CIA is so stupid to tell the guy making the boot, hey, we're really not going to the moon. Don't tell anybody.
Yeah.
No, of course not. And then once the rocket goes up, there's only 3 eyewitnesses. We have publications from von Braun from the 1950s that say it's impossible to go to the moon in one rocket unless it weighs 800,000 tons. The Saturn V weighed 2,500 tons. That's a difference of about 30,000%. So he admitted in writing, in fact, he said these numbers are irrefutably mathematical, meaning they cannot be changed. It is the way that it is. He said to go to the moon in one rocket, it must weigh 800,000 tons to travel nonstop. And of course, the Saturn V was only 2,500 tons, or 30,000th of a percent as much. So that being the case, he already put in writing that it couldn't be done. And now they're saying in order to send men to the moon, they have to first ferry up fuel to the fuel space station first, and then from there go to lunar orbit. Well, they didn't do that the first time, so why are they having to do that now? And then one of the clips that you can see for free at Sibrel.com, just go to the website, click on the top left button that says Moonman Video Links. We have Kelly Smith, a NASA employee, saying something most people don't know, which is there's severe field of radiation that surrounds the Earth. That
the Van Allen belt.
That's right. Now, the space station is well below that. In fact, every manned mission has been well below the radiation, except going to the moon. You'd have to go through it. Well, Kelly Smith says on camera, we show it at Sibrel.com, he says the technology necessary for an astronaut to survive leaving Earth orbit and going through this radiation to the moon has yet to be invented. So then how did they go to the moon, right, without killing the crew? Because he says the technology necessary to go to the moon without killing the crew has not been invented yet. That's why the Artemis rocket is unmanned, because they cannot send a human beyond Earth orbit without killing them. He said
did you?
And it's
Sorry,
proven by the Artemis rocket being unmanned.
Did you hear what Bill Nye said?
Well,
Bill Nye, they tried to reframe the argument and say that the moon is actually within our atmosphere, so you wouldn't have to go outside of it to pass the Van Allen belts.
Well, he didn't know what he's talking about. He needs to read Van Allen's writings. They did tests in the 50s. We show a clip at Sibrel.com of them saying, the radiation is so severe when they sent Geiger counters into the radiation field, it broke the needles. They vibrated so much, they destroyed the Geiger counters. And so it's not my opinion, it's NASA's opinion. NASA said, Kelly Smith said, the clip is at Sibrel.com, the technology necessary for an astronaut to leave Earth orbit without dying from radiation has not been invented yet. That's why the Artemis rocket is unmanned. That's why they can't go to the moon. But it also means then how did they go to the moon? if the technology necessary to do so has not been invented yet. Because that's what NASA just said on tape for all to see at Sibrel.com. So,
oh, don't forget to plug your YouTube page
all the time. What'd you say, Marcus?
Don't forget to plug your YouTube page also, because people need to check that out, because you got a lot of good stuff there too.
Yeah, I mean, just go to Sibrel.com and the top left buttons, Moonman video links, show everything, more than enough proof. And then for $20, you can get me reading the entire book, Moonman, the true story of a filmmaker on the CIA hit list, or a Kindle version for 10, I think, or maybe 20. I think they're all under $20. And I spent 10 years writing it, 2 years editing it, and it culminates with the deathbed confession of Cyrus Eugene Akers, who stood beside President Johnson at Cannon Air Force Base in Clovis, New Mexico, while he watched the filming of the first fake moon landing. He gave us the CIA code name. He gave us a list of 15 people who President Johnson gave to him and said, these people are allowed in to eyewitness it. He gave me that list. So, I mean, an eyewitness is enough to convict somebody in court. And we have an eyewitness who was there when they filmed the faking of the moon landing. We have classified footage of them faking a 1-foot model right in front of your eyes. That's shown in A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. We have shadows intersecting at 90 degrees from objects 5 feet apart, which it's impossible to take place in sunlight like they claim. It can only be done in electrical light, which means they're on the moon. And then we have the simple deductive logic that they can't have 1,000 times farther space traveling capability in 1969 than they can today. That's impossible. The technology cannot be greater in the past and in the future. It's just scientifically impossible, which means they didn't go. And if it weren't a god to people, literally, I've talked to scientists who said, even if they saw an Apollo astronaut on national TV confessing that the moon missions were fake, they would still think they walked on the moon anyway. They won't give it up. They won't give up their God. You know, it boggles the mind, you know?
Well, it's the same. I mean, like, you know, in the political arenas that I deal with, it's the same thing with some of these people who are Democrats or Republicans or whatever. All of these people, it becomes a form of a religion for that they will make it work, even if there's all these contradicting figures. I've noticed some people who have made some, because, you know, they've had time to, okay, they saw Bart's work. Let's try to figure out ways to refute the strong points that he brought out. And so I heard one guy make the point, well, the reason why there's no stars is because it's actually, that would be technically daylight at the time they're on the moon. And so if you were like standing under a light pole and you're looking up at the light pole, your eyes would be technically blinded, even though it's dark behind it and your pupils could not adjust to the stars behind it. I was like, that's a load of hot baloney. So I was wondering, what is your thoughts on that, like, whole line of pushback?
Well, we show a clip in A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon where they were asked, Neil Armstrong was asked, did he see any stars on the surface of the moon? And then he says, I don't remember. And it's like saying, okay, when you were in Paris, do you remember, did you see the Eiffel Tower? I don't remember. I mean, you would remember. So the reason why he was told not to talk about it is because they couldn't fake the astrological position of the stars in the background. Now, they could argue that the exposure was mostly closed for the bright surface and the bright spacesuits. And for that reason, they didn't show up in the background. I think that's an acceptable reason. The problem is, why didn't they just pan the camera over, tilt it up at the sky, open the exposure, and take a picture of the stars, which they would have done if they were there. But they weren't there, therefore they didn't do it, and they didn't talk about it. I mean, really, the Earth should have been huge over the horizon in multiple pictures. I mean, do you go to Paris without taking a picture of you with the Eiffel Tower behind you? And wouldn't you take a picture of you with the Earth behind you? But they couldn't fake even the Earth behind them. They didn't have the technology back then. They'd have to rotate the Earth. The cloud patterns would have to match from weather satellites of the day. And they couldn't do it. So they never talked about the Earth in the background. They never talked about the stars. And he even said, I don't remember. I mean, come on, give me a break. That's like George Bush Sr. Where were you when Kennedy was shot? I don't remember what city I was in. you know.
Exactly.
Dallas.
You couldn't forget that.
You know, the thing is, if they really went to the moon, Marcus, anyone who says otherwise is an idiot.
Yeah.
So why are there hundreds and hundreds of websites, you know, with videos and articles to defend the so obvious moon landings if they're so obviously real? I mean, if a bunch of people were saying Mickey Mouse was the first president instead of George Washington, do you think there'd be 100 internet videos going by point to point saying no, George Washington really was the president? Well, no. So if the moon missions have to be so constantly supported, that's because they need support, because they're fake. Yeah. I mean, thou does protest too much. And, you know, it's like this video you just showed at the beginning. YouTube put like the biggest warning on top of it of any video I've ever made. Don't listen to this guy. And then the views were doubling every day, like 7 days in a row. And then suddenly the view count magically stops. Either they're lying about the view count or they're preventing people from seeing it somehow. Why? Well,
I know how they do it. They do that to me.
If they really went to the moon, why is all this energy spent to you know refute people who say Mickey Mouse is the first president? I mean, it makes no sense unless it really has to be defended because it's a straw man to begin with, right?
Yeah, I mean, I know how they do it because I've seen them do it to me. So I know exactly what they're doing to that video to stop it from growing. Another one, like it
on Twitter, I think Musk said, you know, shadow banning and all that stuff's real. They testified under oath that they didn't do it under oath. They testified they don't do that stuff, and there's paper trails that they do it all the time. So Twitter's doing it. You better believe YouTube is doing it too. Google and everybody else. In fact, if you type in, you know, moon landing fraud, you don't get anything about the moon landing fraud. You get everything about how to defend the moon landings, right? Even if you type in my film, a funny thing happened on the way to the moon, you don't get my film. You get a film, you know, saying how no, they really went to the moon. You know, it just boggles the mind. I uploaded the famous video of me being punched by Buzz Aldrin after I asked him to swear in the Bible that he walked on the moon, which he refused to do because he told me he believes in God and that's why he didn't do it, right? That the video's been up there, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. I have 50,000 subscribers, and it's gotten something like 400,000 views in 6 years with 50,000 subscribers. Now, somebody else whose channel is pro moon landing uploads the same punch clip, okay? And in 30 days, it gets 2 million views when they have 600 subscribers, and I've got 50,000. So how can that even be possible, right? If they're a neutral publishing platform, right?
Well, because they're not. I mean, it's obvious that they literally fixed the algorithm. They decided that, you know what, the rest of the content on this page is going to be contrary. So if we promote this in the algorithm, they'll see this video that Bart put out, but we'll also be able to lead them towards information which is contrary to what Bart is saying. I mean,
it also proves, Marcus, that the people who are doing this clever censorship are the same people who faked the moon landing, because who faked the moon landing? The CIA. So they're the ones who are concerned that the truth comes out, because then they would be shut down and put out of business, right? If it comes out that the CIA killed Kennedy, which his own nephew says is true, and if it comes out that they, you know, did 9/11 and faked the moon landing, they will be shut down. Congress will shut them down. So the entity that is most concerned about the moon landings being exposed is the CIA. So Google and everybody are censoring, banning, putting warning labels about the truth about the moon landings, which means they're run by the CIA. I mean, Google was founded by DARPA, which is a CIA military intelligence organization, and they bought YouTube only 1.5 years after it was in existence, right? And so it's pretty direct. The CIA runs Google, and that's why they, you know, so much defend the moon landings, which are fraudulent. Like I said, if they're real, then everyone who says otherwise is an idiot. Why bother? You know what I mean?
Well,
Look up how many videos are defending George Washington being the first president, making sure people believe that one.
Yeah, you could say, yeah, nobody's defending that,
right?
Right. I mean, another thing is, if you look also into Hollywood, if you look at most movies, and I don't know, most people out there, I'm pretty sure you guys have done. If you haven't, go and check out some of your favorite movies, and what you'll see at the bottom of them, you'll see FBI, CIA, DOD. Why are they having any kind of approval on what's going on in supposedly fictional, entertainment?
Well, look at television. I think there's at least 2 programs, if not 3, glorifying the FBI, and 1 or 2 on television right now glorifying the CIA. That's just standard propaganda. Now, while the rank and file members of the CIA and the rank and file of the FBI may be genuine people, I've talked to district leaders who say, look, they tried to expose corruption of this senator and this president, and they were told they would be fired if they did it. So, it's a bunch of PR, because even though the rank and file of the CIA and the FBI may be honest, they're not the ones in control. And this is why presidential appointments should not be allowed for the departments of government, because you get corrupt presidents who then appoint corrupt people of the FBI, CIA, Justice Department, FDA, and everything else. I mean, almost every person who's in charge of the FDA or the CDC is like a former vice president of Pfizer who was indicted for, making fraudulent claims against a product.
And you know what? One of these times I want to have you on to talk about that.
What's that?
One of these times I want to have you on because I saw some of the stuff that you talked about on what can't be said on YouTube, but I want to hear you really lay out on that. So I want to try to make sure to get you on for a second time, because I would love to hear. I'd love for my audience also, and I'll do that one Rockfin exclusively. That way we can speak freely.
You can go to Sibrel.com, scroll down to the bottom. There are 3 video channels: YouTube, Brighteon, and I think Odyssey. Click on the Odyssey one, and I think it has Bart's final COVID summary on there. It's like 2 hours long. I must have spent 2,000 hours of research producing that video, and all backed up by news stories, independent news stories, and eyewitness testimony of what's really going on. I mean, if a former vice president of the company making the medicine that they're trying to get people to take even when they're not sick says there really isn't a sickness, and this medicine really isn't the best idea for longevity, that's not my opinion. It's the guy who used to work there, selling the stuff. So, I mean, really, it's really not Bart's opinion that we didn't go to the moon. It's the opinion of the people I interviewed. I mean, a guy gave me $1 million who builds rockets for NASA who said they were fake. I have a guy who worked for the Apollo program for 6 years. He told me it was fake. I have a guy who stood beside President Johnson and watched them film it at Cannon Air Force Base who told me it was fake. Now, I can tell you that shadows do not intersect at 90 degrees in sunlight from objects 5 feet apart. That's impossible. Go outside and give it a try. And you can see this at Sibrel.com as clear as day. You can prove the moon landing fraud with 1 photograph of the shadows intersecting at 90 degrees from objects 5 feet apart. When go out on a sunny day in a parking lot or your yard, stand beside your bud, and your shadows will never, ever, ever intersect. So how can they intersect at 90 degrees in moon pictures? Well, they can if they're lit with electrical lighting, which means they're not on the moon, they're on Earth. That's where they have electrical plugs, right?
Yes, exactly.
So there you go. And then we have, like I said, and a funny thing happened on the way to the moon. We discovered a classified reel of fake photography of them creating a 1-foot model of the Earth, pretending it's floating in space, with a 3rd track of audio of the CIA telling them not to answer NASA right away, fake a 4-second delay so it'll appear as if you're, halfway to the moon when you're still in Earth orbit. We have that crystal clear. And then the reason the book at Sibrel.com is called Moon Man, the true story of a filmmaker on the CIA hit list, is when I showed this classified footage to astronaut Edgar Mitchell, he got so mad at me.
Was that the one that kicked you?
Yeah, he kicked me from behind in the commotion. And you can see this for free at Sibrel.com. We in the commotion, we leave a wireless microphone on the guy, and my cameraman in the commotion forgets to stop recording. So when the camera is in the back seat of the rental car in the guy's driveway, he's inside his house with the doors closed, having a private conversation with his son, and we're still recording it with the high quality wireless microphone, right? And he's discussing with his son whether or not to call the CIA to have me assassinated. His son says, quote, "Do you want to call the CIA and have him whacked?" Well, first of all, why does an Apollo astronaut have, CIA in his Rolodex, for one? And then secondly, if they really went to the moon and I'm some silly person who thinks they made it up, why would the CIA have to kill somebody who thinks Mickey Mouse was the first president? It wouldn't make any sense. So the fact that they're talking about me being killed by the CIA means I'm correct, because that wouldn't be necessary if I wasn't correct, which means they didn't go to the moon. The fact that they destroyed all the technology when they should have saved it means they didn't go to the moon. The fact that they destroyed all the original videotapes right before they'd be shown in IMAX, that proves they didn't go to the moon. I mean, it just boggles the mind when a scientist, allegedly scientist professor, says even a confession by an Apollo astronaut of it being fake wouldn't convince him. He'd still think he went, even though he was like 10 years old watching it on TV at the time. That's so arrogant to think that they would know better than a firsthand eyewitness. I just don't know what to say.
Well, I mean, this shows how much a person can convince them to something and then hold on to that so firm and tightly that even truth can't break them out of it. One of the things I saw that really woke me up to something being wrong is the Gail Peters map. For those who don't know in the audience, what I'm talking about is most modern maps that are used are the Mercator map. That is the map which we mostly see used. That's the one which they say that this is this comes from the globe. This is what it looks like. And when you see the Gail Peters model, it's completely different. The Gail Peters model shows the continents in vastly different sizes, which would contradict any of the models which are shown.
Well, do you believe in God, Marcus?
Oh, yes, sir. I actually run another channel where I talk about the Bible on a regular.
Yeah, well, I believe in God. Things don't make themselves. Just look at the anatomy of a human body and all the organs being, completely different, but working together in perfect harmony, just like a car. A car doesn't make itself. A flower and a bee can't, independently, evolve to need each other. That's not possible. I think people don't believe in God, so they won't have to obey God so that they can keep on sinning, and if you don't believe in God, then science and politics is your God, and putting a man on the moon is science and politics, and that's the allegedly greatest accomplishment of mankind. It's interesting, isn't it? It's a false God. Now, some people make the mistake of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I grew up in a religion that just, I sensed as a 6-year-old, something's not right with this place. And as soon as it became voluntary, I left. Now, my problem was I associated the Bible with religion. So I didn't want to read the Bible. Why do I want to read anything about that false religion? But they're completely different. The Bible is its own entity, and religion can be good or bad, and probably most often is bad and hypocritical. But that doesn't mean the Bible is true. And the fact is, the moon landings are fake. And as soon as Bill Casey came out with his book, We Didn't Go to the Moon, and appeared on Oprah, they immediately said, "Oh, you think the Earth is flat too." As soon as I made a funny thing happen on the way to the moon, they said, "Oh, you think the Earth is flat." As soon as my book came out, they say, "Oh, you think the Earth is flat." What they're trying to do is discredit the fact that the moon landings were fake. The Earth could be a triangle. It doesn't matter. The issue isn't geography or the shape of the Earth. The issue is government corruption. And the moon landing proves the government is incredibly corrupt. I mean, 75% of Americans agree that Oswald did not kill Kennedy, and yet nothing is done about it. We have 3,000 architects and engineers signing a petition, risking their livelihoods and reputations, saying it's mechanically impossible for a pinhole airplane to bring down a skyscraper. Just look at Oklahoma City bombing. Half the building was blown away, and that thing didn't collapse because a grid can't collapse even though half of it is blown away. So a pinhole airplane going in and out of a grid is not going to cause it to collapse. And yet nothing is done about it 20 years later.
Yep.
We have a deathbed testimony of a guy who said, I witnessed them faking the moon landing. CIA YouTube puts a big warning on it. Don't believe them. They can't take it down because it would mean that I'm right. So they, trying to do it in as clever a way as possible. Now, I think the reason why people think the earth is flat is because the government says it's round. But the term wicked comes from candle wick. When I look at a candle wick, it looks like one strand, but you look at it really close, it's two. So wicked comes from half truth and half lies, which makes it difficult, you see. So I think the earth is a sphere. And I think the problem is the government is so corrupt. If they said the sky is blue, people would say, well, it must be green. If they say it's a globe, it must be flat. If they say a hurricane is happening, it must not be happening. They're going to tell the truth half the time to make it difficult to tell the truth from the lies. Also, Jesus never mentioned that geography is a prerequisite to eternal life. You don't have to know the capital of Greenland. You don't have to know the size of a continent. You don't have to know whether the earth is flat or round. It doesn't matter. The issue is repentance of sin.
True.
If you repent of your sin to the best of your ability to the end, then God's grace will allow you to enter heaven.
He who endures to the end.
Yeah, it, 24:13 Matthew. And
yes, sir.
So, that's the struggle I'm in every day. I mean, every day I just beat myself up for not only sin I did in the past, just little things like I was short with somebody. I kind of, could have let that person in traffic and I didn't because I was in a hurry. I'm constantly thinking, what can I do to be less of a jerk?
Well, yeah. Well, if more people were trying to live through those means and think in those ways, a lot of things will be different. If people, we got to keep in mind also what you were saying with the I think about some people say, well, why would they fake it? Like I heard somebody literally say, well, it would just be easier for them to go to the moon than it would have been for them to fake it in 1969. And I'm like, are you insane? We're talking about how would that be easier? I mean,
it's weird that that big defenders of the fake moon landings use that as I guess an argumentation when in fact the exact opposite is true. Look at the film The Martian. Okay, did they fly to Mars to film on location? No. It's much easier to fake something than to really do it. That's just the case. I mean, either print a real $100 bill or print a fake one, which is more difficult. The real one's more difficult. I mean, come on. Going to the moon on the first attempt is just preposterous because on the South Pole is here on Earth, and it took them 3 or 4 times just to reach that without killing the crew. First, second, third crew tried to reach the South Pole here on Earth, died. NASA has never kept a schedule in their entire history, except the most difficult mission of all time. They were ahead of schedule. They said in 2014, the Artemis would be orbiting the moon in 2018. What is it now? They're 4 years behind schedule with 5 decades better technology. So even with 5 decades better technology, they're 4 years behind schedule just to orbit the moon. So how could they land and walk on the moon and breathe and drink water on the moon with 50-year-older technology the first time they tried ahead of schedule? When with 5 decades better technology, they're 4 years behind schedule just to orbit the moon. That makes no sense.
Not at all.
I mean, come on. I mean, give it up.
Well, I believe personally, this is just my belief and reasoning why they did it. Well, they did it for a couple of reasons. Well, one of the primary reasons is right after the Cold War, right after they just dropped, the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Well, what is a bigger threat? That I could launch a missile all the way from the United States and hit a target anywhere I want. If you're bringing over Operation Paperclip bringing over literal Nazi scientists to work on rocketry, more than likely using, and also, by the way, keep in mind, using Boeing and Northrop Grumman and a bunch of different weapons companies, and you're working on rockets and distance, it makes perfect sense that you could be using their technology as a, possible deterrent, more than, actually focusing really on worrying about space. That actually makes more sense to me. I mean, if you're really worried about discovery, we've only discovered about 3% of the ocean. Why haven't we tried to figure out what's deeper below?
Yeah, I mean, even if they could, that's a good point, Marcus. Even if they could go to the moon, it's not really humane or intelligent to do it until every person has indoor plumbing and clean drinking water and food, and a concrete floor. You understand? I mean,
Yeah.
we claim to be an intelligent species, and yet, if there's half the world doesn't have clean drinking water, and we're spending billions of dollars to map out the surface of Venus better than the Earth has been mapped out, I'd say that's stupid, if you ask me. I mean, we can hire just as many people. We can feed why don't we turn the military industrial complex into the feed the world industrial complex? I don't mind spending tax dollars to give plumbing to people and concrete floors. Still employ the same people. Heck, they can even take the same bribes and quadruple middleman if they want and charge 40 times more than it costs. But why not do it to feed people and give them plumbing?
Yeah. I mean, I'm right next to Skid Row. I mean, I'm not right next to it, but
you're in LA?
I'm like 15 miles from Skid Row. How many people could you be feeding and housing that you're focused on? Let's try to work on a Mars rover. I mean,
the homelessness and the poverty in America is embarrassing, shameful, is what it is. It shouldn't even be embarrassing. That's selfish. It's shameful. I mean, and then the roads, the bridges, they're terrible. I hit a pothole so bad it destroyed brand new tires. They can't even take care of the roads. They can't even synchronize traffic lights of the main street of a capital city of a state. One turns green, the very next one turns red. You wait, it turns green, the very next one turns red. They can't even synchronize traffic lights to save gas, pollution. If they say they want to save gas, they say they want to save pollution. I estimated that they would save $6 billion a year in fuel if they synchronize traffic lights. They would pollute, 6% less instantly. They can't even do that. They can't even synchronize a traffic light. So how can they walk on the moon? Come on.
Or come up with proper transportation in most cities. A rail system is something that you could work on. More potable drinking water throughout this country. You can't figure that out. And then I think in the military, sorry about that, sirens going by, but how many different
You're in LA.
Yeah, it is LA. But how many
surprised we haven't heard 10 by now.
That's true. Wow, what was that? That sounded crazy. But another thing that I thought about is how many different weapon systems that I saw that do not work properly all the time. How many times are there collateral damage? How many times are they firing something off here and sorry, that one went astray and bombed the school instead? I mean,
well, they don't need to use conventional weapons anymore. Actually, they have space-based lasers that could, pretty much take care of any target. But the problem is they're very inexpensive once they're up there. And then what are you going to do with all of their friends and all of their missile and?
But my point is,
right?
They're not accurate with this stuff. So why would we believe that they would be accurate with all the other stuff that they said, like getting to the moon in one shot?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like criminals run our government, and it looks like they will continue to do so. They're only getting better over time. They're only getting more entrenched into every department of government and more in control and pulling off bigger and bigger lies and killing more and more and more people. The second to last chapter of my book is called NASA's greatest fear.
Mhm.
And again, the book is at Sibrel.com in print, Kindle, or audio. I read it. And it's a testimony that I publish from a former Apollo astronaut's widow who says that he was murdered by the CIA because he wouldn't cooperate with fraud in NASA during the moon missions. That's not my opinion, it's her opinion. And so this is the man who would have been the first man to walk on the moon, and his 2 crew members were intentionally murdered by the CIA, according to her, not me. And so what this means is the government is taking a third of our labor, a third of our income, and not only are they lying to us with it, they're using that money to hire CIA agents and materials to kill our fellow brethren citizens who are trying to expose their crimes, right? The Constitution is not the first document. It's the Declaration of Independence, which says whenever government becomes destructive of these ends, it's the right of the people to alter or abolish it. What are those ends? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So the government is on record for killing their own people. I mean, come on, it's in writing. Kennedy's, crew members came up with the idea. They put it in writing. Hey, why don't we bomb Americans, kill our own people, and blame it on Cuba? They put that as a proposal to President Kennedy in writing. It's an historic document. Now, why those people aren't in jail for attempted murder, I have no idea. Because if I put in writing that here's a plan of killing somebody, I think that's enough evidence for attempted murder, I'm pretty sure. And so Kennedy's own cabinet members put in writing that they were willing to kill Americans to blame it on Cuba. That was their suggestion. And according to the widow of the dead astronaut, he was murdered by the CIA. So they are killing their own citizens, and we're financing it. The government is killing their own people. Why are they still in power? How can that be? How can it be an established, published fact that the federal government suggested murdering their own citizens, and that same government is still in power? How can that even be? I mean, do you see how messed up it is?
Oh yeah. I wanted to get this one question in because you brought up Elon for a little bit. I was wondering, like, what is your thoughts and opinion on a lot of this Starlink stuff and the applications and uses, and what do you think is going on with this? What do you think ultimately is the goal of this stuff?
Well, you're talking about Starlink putting relatively inexpensive satellites all around the world so you can have satellite internet. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
I think that's a good idea. I think it's a brilliant idea. I think my opinion is that Elon Musk is a sincere person, and that he is playing ball because he needs NASA's cooperation to fulfill his dreams of doing, passenger high Earth orbit flights or trips to orbit the moon or things like that. He knows that they didn't go to the moon. He's got a copy of my book. I know that for a fact. And he knows they didn't go, but he's not mentioning it for cooperation. I know someone who works for the Chinese Space Agency. Everybody in China knows they didn't go to the moon. The agreement is they will not publicly say that the moon missions are fake, but they also won't publicly say that they are real either, to save integrity according to their own culture. And that agreement is so that they can get computer and space technology from NASA, which they are receiving under the table. So whoever's selling that to them is, violating the Espionage Act. And they're doing it anyway. It's just like CIA killed their own president. Not my opinion. That's the opinion of the dead man's nephew, right? I think being of the family who has access to all those documents, I think they would know. So it's an established fact that the CIA killed their own president, suggested killing citizens at random to blame it on a foreign power. Does that sound like 9/11 or what? And then you have 3,000 architects and engineers saying it was explosives that brought down the buildings, which means pretty much that's a scientific fact. And yet and nothing is done about it.
Don't forget the dancing Israelis who were standing there before.
Yeah, all the departments that are supposed to be investigating this corruption are corrupt. So there you go. The foxes are running the hen house factory, and don't expect them to stop murdering and eating the chickens, because they will continue. And so when Jesus said things are going to get so bad in the last days that unless God intervenes, no one will be saved, my interpretation of that is that the evil people are going to win in this world. And so be it. What good is it to gain the world and forfeit your soul? I don't think it can be stopped. I don't think anything is going to happen to end the corruption of the United States government or the other governments of the world. I don't think it's going to happen. So I think it's better off just saving yourself from this corrupt generation and preparing for the worst and surviving it spiritually first, and then physically if you can.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great and outstanding advice for all of us to keep. I'm trying to think. That's right. I don't want to keep you too long. I want to make sure that you come back. But anything that you have coming up, that any interviews or any projects that you have that you're working on that we should keep an eye out for?
Well, the main thing is just go to Sibrel.com. I recently uploaded 4 videos to the homepage, including the deathbed confession of the son who heard his father's deathbed confession of him witnessing the moon landing fraud, a short little music video that I made about kind of my trials and tribulations. One of the things I go into in the book that I never discussed publicly is the CIA literally kidnapping me and drugging me when I found the classified footage. I go into great detail about that in the book, and it is what it is. And, all I could say is you can scroll down if you want to, I think there's a section midway on the Sibrel.com website where I have like 4 or 5 interviews highlighted. I go into great detail about the Apollo 1 fire, which is the CIA murder of the crew that would have been the first crew. I go into greater detail about my being kidnapped and drugged by the CIA in those interviews. And you can see in full the video that you just showed and all the clips that are in the book. You don't even have to buy the book. You can watch all the clips for free at Sibrel.com. These films cost $1 million to make, and we were financed by a board member of an aerospace company who builds rockets for NASA who knows that they're fake. So he gave us the money as his patriotic duty to expose this fraud. You can see all that's for free at Sibrel.com. And if you want to, get a copy of the book, in audio or Kindle or print. And there's a lot of resources there. Just look at them all and be warned and save yourself, right? Turn away from your own wicked ways. Otherwise, even though we might be technically less sinners than the people who faked the moon landing and killed Kennedy, if we don't repent on our own scale, everything's relative, then we won't make it either. We'll be in
it says we'll all have our part in the lake of fire, if not. So, and I want to let everybody know who's watching. I don't have it up now, but give me right after this is over, I will be putting Bart's website in the description box, and the 2 clips which I showed earlier, I will be putting those in. And I got a couple of other nuggets I want to throw in. Oh yeah, one more thing if you got time for it. Well, I'm trying to remember which one it was. It was the astronauts who went up and allegedly they all died. Can't remember which one it was. I'm blanking.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's scuttlebutt about the Challenger crew still being alive.
The Challenger, yeah. I was wondering, what's your thoughts on that?
I don't think that they are. Everybody has people who look like them. I think they're just, finding people who are lookalikes, and I don't think it matters. That's not the issue. The most valuable thing that we have is time.
Yeah.
And one of the main reasons why the U.S. government continues to their reign of corruption and tyranny is because no one has the time to do something about it. People spend 2.5 work weeks a month watching television, right? 100 hours a month. And they, commute to work and commute back, and they have to go to the dry cleaner and spend some time with their family. And then they spend the 5 hours a day watching television. And then that's all that's left. So, you know,
Mhm.
we can't really waste our time going into, is the Earth flat or a sphere? Is a Challenger crew still alive or not? The main thing is to save yourself, get yourself right with God, and then try to help other people do likewise, because everyone's going to die anyway. The people, Bill Gates and George Soros and all those people who are running the show, they're going to die. And then what? Eternity is the life we should be preparing for, the next life. Because after Judgment Day, it says that the wicked will be destroyed. That doesn't mean they're in hell forever going, oh, what an idiot I was. They just don't exist anymore. Remember, it says, God so loved the world that whoever believes by obeying the Son of God will not perish, but have eternal life. So you
John
either
3:16.
perish or you have eternal life. If you're in hell forever alive, then you also have eternal life, right? No, you
Mhm.
just perish. You're burned up. You're destroyed. So you either live forever after Judgment Day or you're dead forever after Judgment Day. That's why my not favorite scripture, but most important one to me, what good is it to gain the whole world and forfeit your soul? All these people running the show, they will gain the world and they will forfeit their soul if they don't repent. So we have to get right with God, stay right with God, and if we love other people, help them to do likewise, and then we'll live forever in a world with no wickedness ever again. It says in the Old Testament book Obadiah, after the new heaven and new earth is reestablished, sin will not happen a second time. That's why the wicked are destroyed instead of put off to another place. It never says they're relocated. No, it says they're destroyed, and that way they won't ever mess things up again. So we live in the last days, and this is the sad state of the world. If you watch a funny thing happened on the way to the moon, which is for free at Sibrel.com, just click on the top left button, Moonman video links. I think it's link number 2. You can see that I use kind of spiritual analogies for this faking of the moon landing, which Nixon called the greatest event since creation when he knew they weren't there. You see? And so the moon landing, if it happened, is the greatest accomplishment of mankind. But the fact that it didn't happen is very profound. It means that mankind is fallen and corrupt. They lie about their greatest accomplishment, and some people will always believe in the lie. And then interesting, they do not perceive the truth, and they openly admit they're not interested in the truth. Either this little thing that's been going on the last 2 years is either real or it's not. Either this medicine for an illness people don't even have, either it's good for you or it's not. You may think it's good, and you may think what's been going on is real. But what if you're wrong? According to the former vice president of the company making the medicine, the little reason for it was non-existent, and that the medicine is designed to fulfill Bill Gates's goal, which is to lower the population by a significant amount. I mean, I show a clip in this video, where Bill Gates, it's on YouTube, they haven't taken it down. Bill Gates said of his own mouth, one of the tools for lowering the population are these.
Yeah,
Well,
that was the one where him and Melinda were sitting there. Yeah, I remember that one.
If these are good for you, that would increase the population, and then those people would have children. You see, so something's not going on correctly. Something wicked is underfoot here.
That could be that second plague that you were talking about, that you were alluding to in that one video.
Yeah, I mean, Bill Gates is already saying there will be a second pandemic, and then he smirks like it's an established fact. And for all we know, it could be a pandemic of reactions to a certain medicine that people got earlier, like a time delay fuse. So,
which many of us warn people about.
Yeah, Hitler, Mussolini, what's the guy's name from Vietnam? Pat Kong and Stalin. They all together, they killed something like 50 million people intentionally less than 100 years ago. So those psychopathic people had devout followers, and those psychopathic people were world leaders. And so, world leaders could be psychopathic today with the very same goals of lowering the population by millions of people. They're just doing it in a more clever way than before,
Mhm.
right?
Well, yeah.
The
Don't
Bible
forget
says
the.
that
Oh,
Lucifer
sorry.
runs the world until Christ come back, and he gives the kingdoms of the world to his people. It says so in the Bible. So the kingdoms of the world are so wicked because Lucifer gave it to them, and he's in
Mhm.
charge until the Messiah comes back. So we're stuck in this mess, and so try to save yourself spiritually, physically if you can, and share the salvation, right?
Yeah.
If you really love people, and stop arguing with people about blue and red, Republican, Democrat. They want us fighting each other instead of going after the evil people at the top, and really stop arguing over round or flat. That's irrelevant. The issue is life or death eternally. That's the issue, not
Mhm.
whether the earth is round or flat. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
the moon landing fraud being the greatest event of mankind is just an example, a parable of the corruption of the earth. My hope is that it will be exposed, that God will allow that as a final rebuke to the world. And who knows, maybe Noah's Ark will be found as a final encouragement to the world.
I think it has been found though.
Not
That one in
officially,
Turkey.
not officially. I mean, it's there somewhere, but it hasn't been declared as found. And if it is before the end of the world, then that would be a testimony that the Bible is true. I've read the Bible. It's not flattering to the heroes. All the heroes mess up. They're murderers, they're adulterers. Those are the heroes. It's just a history book recording mankind's journey from a perfect world to a fallen one that, like a parent with a divine eternal calendar, allows us to mess up our room and mess up the car that we're given. If we crash the car we're given by our dad, it's our own fault. If we're told we can do whatever we want in our bedroom and we mess it up, it's our own fault. So evil doesn't happen in the world because of God, it happens because of us. He gave us the keys to the world, and now he's going to let us mess it up as a divine eternal lesson to ourselves and to the angelic realm. So that's the way that it is.
Well, I think that's a great word to close out on and for everyone to reflect on. And I want to definitely say thank you for taking the time. I know that there are tons of people who are trying to get a hold of you to have you on for an interview, and I'm just thankful that you granted me the time to have you on and have this conversation, and hopefully we can have further conversations in the future.
Sure, just let me know.
All right, thank you so much, Bart. And I'll tell everybody out there in the chat, I appreciate everybody for coming and taking the time, spending it with us and listening to myself and Bart. And you guys all have a good one. This has been the Political Matrix. See you guys all later.